I think deliveries are too slow. I think that will be and the biggest obstacle of that is not having the right delivery partners across the board.
Is that deliveries coming into you or deliveries going out?
It's a bit of both, but from a customer point of view, if you're, and I'll use, pharmacy as an example, a lot of the time you need those items really quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to wait a week for it, you may as well have gone to the store. So you're actually competing against yourself a lot of the time to get stuff out to people. So that biggest obstacle of getting stuff to people is you're actually competing against people walking into a store where they can get it immediately. We've seen a lot of behaviour from customers over the period of time where they use e-com to reserve stock and do click and collect because they know that they're not sure if they go into that store whether that item's going to be there.
Hey there, and welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. If you're looking to get more sales, more customers, master your marketing, and ultimately take control of your retail or e-commerce business, then you're in the right place. I'm Selena Knight, a retail growth strategist and multi-award-winning store owner whose superpower is uncovering exactly what your business requires to move to the next level. I'll provide you with the strategies, the tools, and the insight you need to scale your store. All you need to do is take action. Ready to get started? Hey there, and welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. Now, I don't know if you have ever noticed, but if you've been listening for a while, maybe I've even told you this, but we run our podcast schedule according to the 5 core pillars of retail success. So each week we cycle through money, sales, customers, marketing, impact. I'm pretty sure it goes in that order. And today's episode is about money. Now, the funny thing is you probably think when I talk money, I'm talking about like making money, but realistically, the money pillar is all about understanding how money works in your business. And today's episode is actually, even though we're talking about fulfillment, it's kind of about money. We're talking about ways that you save money, ways that you optimize the money that you're paying out. Now, money is really important, especially right now. In fact, when people come into our Scale Your Store program or into our Supercharged Mastermind, generally the first thing they need to focus on is their money pillar. Just really getting a grip on where money comes into their business, how it moves around their business, and of course, how it leaves the business. But I am not immune to sometimes forgetting about my money pillar. And I know that this quarter, one of the key things I've focused on is really getting a reset on how money moves around our business because we've hired a bunch of people. We are spending a lot more in ads. We have a lot of people coming into the business. We have different services, or that's probably not the right word, but a different degree, a different level of service that we want to provide. And all of that costs money. I mean, my biggest thing apart from wages and ad costs is shipping. Oh my God. How expensive is it to post stuff these days? But this has meant I've had to sit down and do a really big crunch on how much all of the things that we provide, all the services, all the training, all the programs, how much does that cost? And it has meant I have had to put up prices. And maybe this is something you've had to deal with too. I actually emailed out, I'm recording this, just a couple of days before the podcast goes live. And I've actually put that out today, an email saying that all the prices are going up. However, what I have done is left a couple of days. In fact, if you are listening when this goes live, you may well have seen the email that goes out, and there's probably a couple of more hours where our Scale Your Store program is currently available for a limited time, like literally till this Friday, Sydney time, with the lifetime access at its current price of $14.97 US. After this week, come the weekend, that pricing schedule completely changes because the simple fact is, we can't continue to provide that service at the price that it currently is. I mean, everything has gone up. So if you're listening and you're interested in Scale Your Store, make sure you check your email because there is a special link to get that lifetime access, but it does literally expire. I'm not sure of the exact time, but I'm pretty sure it is Friday, Friday Sydney time, because if you're in America, that's obviously Thursday, Friday the 14th of October. But I digress. But what I'm trying to, I guess, point out to you is if you haven't increased your prices, if you haven't done that big number crunch, then it is really time to sit down and take stock of where your business is at, because it only gets busier from here on in. You can't afford to wait until January to sit down and do this analysis. All right, so that's my big ranty pants teaching moment for this episode. But I also want to say that if you are on my email subscriber list, I really recommend that you check out the emails that I'm sending this week, because our email database is segmented and we send different offers to different people at different times. So the fact is, you may have received a completely different email from me than somebody else. And that is all based on how how you and I interact, how you interact with our programs, with our emails, with our ads, all that kind of stuff. All that data is collected in the background. So for a select group of people who are on my database, I am sending you out a special email this week. So I want you to go and check it out, because it could be, I'm going to say, potentially life-changing for you. All right. That's all I'm going to say on the subject. So if you're on my email database, make sure you check out the emails that are going out this week. And have you ever noticed that I don't run ads on this program? Well, that's because I want to keep this program, program. Look, I sound like I'm a radio producer. I want to keep this podcast specifically related to what you guys need. And the fact is, I'm really crap at asking for reviews. So I'm going to put this out there and say, if you like the show, I would love it if you could leave me a review on your platform of choice. Maybe that's Apple Podcasts, formerly iTunes, Spotify. Who else is there out there? That's kind of the only two places I listen to podcasts. So leave it on your place of choice and let me know. Send me a DM to let me know and I'll do a shout out for you. All righty. Thank you so much. Let's get into this episode that I recorded at Online Retailer just a little while ago. And we are talking about money, but in a way that maybe you didn't think about. Okay, let's jump in.
Whether you're a retailer waiting on your next order delivery, a manufacturer awaiting your next shipment, or a customer constantly checking to see if your order has been shipped yet, right now fulfillment is top of mind right through the supply chain. When implemented correctly, good fulfillment solutions can drive significant cost savings through efficient picking, reduced freight costs, minimised split deliveries, and automated freight. Today, I'm talking to Matt Neale, CTO of EstarOnline, and Nick Blatt, Head of Ecommerce and Digital Customer Experience at Chemist Warehouse. And they're going to give us some tips on how to master the art of fulfillment. Hey, guys.
What? How are you?
Good, good. Matt, I'm going to start with you because CTO of EstarOnline, you've been in the industry for longer than I have. That's 2 decades. So you've probably seen a lot of things. I would love to know how fulfillment has changed over that time frame.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a long time, and it puts an age on me, right? You know how long I've been in the industry.
That also puts an age on me.
No, we won't talk about that. I think what we've really seen the difference in that 22 odd years has been around, especially around fulfillment, is the customer expectation has changed significantly. 20 years ago, if you ordered something online, it was kind of a novelty. You weren't quite sure when it was going to turn up. It might be 3 days, really unusual back then, but it might be 2 or 3 weeks. And that was just what you expected. Whereas if you look today, if you're not getting your goods within 3 days, 4 days max, you're starting to see a drop off in those rates of repeated buy cycle that you want to see. So really it's that increased expectation of service and sophistication. And we've got a lot of very good retailers that are doing a great job. Same day delivery, being delivered to your door within hours. And if you're not meeting that expectation, you really have to look at why not, I think. So that's probably the biggest change I've seen.
And how does EstarOnline as a company help retailers to affect that change so that their customers are getting what they want?
Yeah, so Estar, we're a software as a service company. We have an e-commerce platform that we've spent 20 odd years building. And what we really try and do with that is enable the retailers to give their customers the right information, that expectation of when they're going to expect the delivery to be set. We give the retailers the tools, the customers the information, and try and make that as easy as possible and remove all of that friction.
And there is so much, I'll call it unrest at the moment, because retailers aren't getting their product, manufacturers aren't getting their product. That supply chain right down through to customer it's like we've gone back 20 years, because sometimes it is taking 3 weeks to get a delivery, where now we're expecting it in an hour.
Oh, yeah, that uncertainty around replenishment from overseas wholesalers and getting, just sourcing stock in has really had an impact on the customers. I think through COVID, it's really drawn attention to those small inefficiencies that exist in your supply chain and in your fulfillment, that up to a level you can sort of tolerate. And then COVID comes along, triples your online volumes, and all of a sudden all those little inefficiencies become big ones. They become noticeable, and the whole thing grinds to a halt. I'm sure Nick's probably seen
I think that's a great
some of that,
segue to Nick. Because
in his experience.
You've come into the industry from a non-e-com background just post-COVID, where the boom has hit, the visits in-store have declined. So before we jump into how you've seen fulfillment change, tell us a little bit about how you ended up in e-com.
Bit of luck to start with, but so my background before was working for Bupa Health Insurance, so managed all things digital growth, and basically we've had the target on my head for the channel of sales for Bupa for digital, but really just needed a change. I've always been really passionate about e-com and understanding, and there's a lot of similarities between it. The only bit which we're talking about today that's really different is around that fulfillment part, where when you're selling a product of some kind, the fulfillment is not that important, and that's the big difference, but everything else is pretty much the same before that part of it.
So you've probably got some very interesting insights coming from lots of similarities to the thing that you didn't understand and being new to this side. First of all, congratulations, Chemist Warehouse, on your global expansion. How has that affected fulfillment?
Oh, look, I think like all retailers, the biggest problem we have is getting stock in the first place. So we would love to we could sell a lot more if we were able to have the stock. And I think everybody has that supply chain issue across the world, no matter what you're doing and where you're selling it. I think one of the advantages that we've had over the period of time is having a really big store network, and you're able to kind of aggregate your stock across 500, 450 stores, plus your distribution centres, and allow you to use that network to be able to get stuff out to people quickly. So we're probably a little bit protected from those bigger things, than what we would be. The other thing as well is when you carry stock in your stores or your distribution centre that, things like paracetamol, where there's 4 or 5 different brands, if you don't have one of the brands, you have the other brands, which does help out a lot of the time. So we've been probably lucky in that regard.
I would love to know from someone who comes in and can think outside of the box, because you haven't been in the industry like we have for decades. What do you think the biggest obstacle is for retail and e-commerce stores right now when it comes to fulfillment?
I think deliveries are too slow. I think that will be the biggest obstacle of that is not having the right delivery partners across the board.
Is that deliveries coming into you or deliveries going out?
It's a bit of both, but from a customer point of view, if you're, and I'll use, pharmacy as an example, a lot of the time you need those items really quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to wait a week for it, you may as well have gone to the store. So you're actually competing against yourself a lot of the time to get stuff out to people. So that biggest obstacle of getting stuff to people is you're actually competing against people walking into a store where they can get it immediately. We've seen a lot of behaviour from customers over the period of time where they use e-com to reserve stock and do click and collect because they know that they're not sure if they go into that store whether that item's going to be there.
I am 100% that person. It's like if I'm going to go to the effort, I want to know that it will be sitting there waiting for me.
Yeah, and sometimes stock moves so quickly, especially for high demand items. I mean, we had a period of time over the last 12 months where we had the rapid antigen test that everybody wanted at that point in time. We actually had to stop selling them online because it was just everybody was going in to reserve them at points. And that's the other extreme of it. But yeah, back to your original point, I think you're almost sometimes competing against yourself because you're competing, if you've got a really good store network, supermarkets are the same. It's quicker to go to the supermarket and get the item sometimes. You're competing against yourself about how quickly you can get that to your house. The only difference with that is that we've seen over the period of time is with something like COVID where you're not able to leave the house, and you need that stuff really quickly, that's where, you can really make a difference to that delivery model.
So if you're competing against yourself, why bother? Appreciate that during COVID, e-com definitely boomed. But if you are in direct competition, Why put the energy in?
It's a good question, and something that I probably confuse myself with sometimes, but I think the main thing is, and we've seen it via COVID, and I just touched on it quite slightly before, was that sometimes you can't get to the store, you can't go there, right? So you are competing against yourself, but there's a whole bunch of customers who are either choosing to go to the store to get the item, or they can get it delivered to you with a cost associated with it. But what we've seen over the last 12 months is sometimes people can't leave the home because they're not feeling very well, or they're not able to leave, or whatever that happens to be in the space. So I think it's a bit of a mix, but I think, you know, if you look back on the last 12 months and you think about all the things that have occurred, it's probably really easy to now understand how e-com works and how to have stuff delivered to your house. There's lots of different delivery methods for it. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a mix of both.
As much as I am the reserving person, I am also the type of person who values my time so much that I will weigh up, is it worth $7 of my time to drive the 10 minutes to, because I'm a frequent shopper at Chemist Warehouse, is it worth my 7 minutes to drive there, get the thing and come back? Or can I just pay $7 and know that it will be here if it's not an urgent product?
Yeah, it's a good point too. I mean, people are busy in their lives. They've got a lot going on. I think, you know, the bit that's the big difference is that in the olden world, you would deliver something, it would take a period of time. You wouldn't actually know when it's going to be delivered because it has to be picked and packed. In the new world, there's an expectation that if you're going to have something delivered, it's at the time you want it delivered, and it's got to be within that period of time frame.
Yeah, and I'm going to be updated along the way.
Correct.
I want to know when it's picked. I want to know when it's shipped. I want to know it's out for delivery. I want to know once it's delivered.
That's right.
And I guess that's one of the things that we probably, Matt and I, have seen over the years is there was never that expectation. It's probably only, in the last 5 years,
Yeah,
you reckon?
I think you'd be right, yeah.
That there is this expectation that if, you know, it was just going to turn up when it was going to turn up.
Yeah.
And if you were lucky, it would turn up at the right house. But now there's an expectation that I want to know every step of the way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's that, again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier around that increased expectation and sophistication of customers. They want to know where it is. They want to be able to know that the order's gone to a particular store and it's ready for click and collect. Click and collect's an interesting thing, actually. With Chemist Warehouse and Nick's, what Nick's group is selling, it is very fast turnaround things. And so they're wanting to go and reserve it and then go straight to the store and get it in different categories. I mean, we operate across many different categories of goods, GM and apparel and so forth. That click and collect drive is not always immediacy. It's not always about that speed of delivery. It's more about convenience of location. It's been really...
Do you reckon certainty as well? Like knowing that if I'm going to go there, it will be there?
Yeah, so a lot of retailers are doing that ship-to-store model as well, where if they don't have it in stock at a particular store, they'll just transfer it and they'll actually distribute it from one of their other stores to that store.
I have to say, sorry to interrupt, they've been doing that in America for a very long time. As someone who does a lot of shopping in America, especially somewhere like Sephora, it was like, oh, that will be at your house tomorrow. Or an Anthropologie store, we'll just order that online. No charge, just the customer. We seem to have been very slow to catch up to that.
Well, I think we've got a different geography as well. So you look at America, the cost of logistics and freight is much lower, in terms of labour cost, even fuel costs are much lower. And in this part of the world, Australia and New Zealand, you've got much greater distances, higher labour costs, higher fuel costs, definitely, especially at the moment. And so it's always been, one of those things that we have to focus on as retailers and people supporting those retailers to make sure that they're managing those costs to a level where it's still feasible to do that and maintain margin. I think, Nick with a store network would have seen this. Those store networks are so important for that last mile and being close to customer. The closer you can get your stock to the customer, and doing those bulk into-store transfers really efficient, and then that final mile to the customer, whether it's click and collect or a delivery, if you're going from stores, you're keeping your costs down and managing that. So I think those retailers that have an established bricks and mortar presence, that have those vast store networks that they can leverage, are actually really finding it a bit easier than those who've just got a DC and they're doing those big, long individual order shipments interstate. Certainly have an advantage. In the US, hey, it's a different geography. They have very different volumes of people. They're 10 times the size of Australia or more than that.
Yeah.
So,
but we can learn from them, right? If they're
100%.
if what they're testing out in their market, if it works, then we can look at adapting that into our market.
Yeah, and I think the other thing they've done really well, and we still are slowly getting there in this part of the world, is using those specialist services for those different parts of your e-commerce. Down here for a long time it was you go to a one-stop shop who does everything for you. It's your e-commerce, it's your ERP, they will do some fulfillment. There might even be some WMS operations in there or capability. In the US for 10, 15 years, it's all been about specialist services. Like one person does your front-end e-commerce, someone else is doing your order management, someone else is doing your WMS, reviews. And we're starting to see that. We're seeing that here at the show. All of these different vendors are now really focused on that one niche and that sophistication of the solutions. And you were talking about it before, how, with Klaviyo, I think was the example of what it used to cost to get a tool with that capability. You're talking six figures, and now it's much less. And I think that commoditization of all that technology is really, and again, something that's changed. And if you look at the fulfillment side of it, I think we're on the cusp of seeing that change in that way as well. So it's a really interesting place to be.
And it's changing so quickly. Yeah, as veterans, like what we're saying, the only people who had the churn rates and the customer analytics and cross-analytic behaviour and all that kind of stuff were very large enterprise customers. But now that is affordable for any level of store. Tell me then, in terms of fulfilment, what do you think, in terms of changes, is now more affordable or more accessible to every level of business?
It's a really good question. I think it's really around having those distributed order management networks, those distributed fulfillment networks, like using the store model. The store fulfillment was punishingly expensive in the past, and you had to have a big enterprise system to be able to do it. The cost of doing that has dropped. You're able to actually add on more locations to your network.
Nick, I've got a question for you. Is quite often fulfillment is seen as a cost centre. Do you think it can be a profit centre?
Well, it's a good question. It's probably a two-folded question. I think if you have the right volume and you have the right partner, I think if the service is really good, you can make a margin on that, and you can aggregate between different services and decide that could be as that. But the more important point of it is, and the more practical thing is that if you are best in class with your delivery and you're doing better than the same type of business down the road, irrespective of pricing, you're going to win anyway. So it's going to be a huge profit center for you. I think, speaking of our example, the growth we've seen in that store model delivery, that localized store model delivery is just massive, because people want everything now. They want it they want it tomorrow. They want it now. They want it in the same day. There's only two bits that, and from your conversation before, there's only two bits of that are complexities for most retailers. Is you can't fit as many things in a store than you can in the big distribution centre, so you're not always going to have the 5 items you want to be able to be delivered. And the secondary point is the picking costs in a store. You're relying on the staff within the store, so you do have a cost associated with that as well. So you've really got to weigh up those two things and make sure your model works for you in that regard, because things can go wrong in that regard too. But I think both of those areas you can definitely have a look at as being, good profit centres for most businesses.
And what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Nick on his points. I think they're really valid. What we've really seen is, especially in that delivery time, if you can shorten that time to delivery or fulfillment for the customer, whether that's making it available for them to collect more quickly or exceeding their expectations on delivery, it really does. It's a virtuous cycle. We see an uplift in overall sales. People tend to buy from one retailer and they won't buy again until they've received their previous order.
Yeah.
So the faster you can shorten that cycle, and actually, shortens that repeat purchase cycle.
I think
and I think that's where you can get more, higher profit, and you can get more sales from it. So,
I was going to say, from a consumer, I know that there are brands that I will buy more from because I know that I can get the order quickly, and there might be a brand that I love more. And if I'm prepared to wait for it, I will order from them. But I think I was saying earlier on, if I buy from the Iconic and I know that it's coming the next day, I'll throw, hundreds of dollars worth of stuff knowing I can send it back, as opposed to an independent retailer where I'm paying for shipping. So I'm just going to buy the one thing.
Yep.
And like you said, wait for it to come. And then if I like it, I'll buy it again.
Yeah. You've got to build up that trust with the retailer. The retailer has to build up that trust with their clients on delivering the product on time when they say they will. If you have a bad experience, you're not going back for a while, if ever. So I think it's really important to it. And I think we've seen some really interesting things in the last couple of years with, of course, everyone talks about it, COVID, right? And there's been some retailers who've done a fantastic job during that period of utilising their store networks, utilising the stock that they've got out closer to customer to actually maintain maintain their businesses. And we've got a couple of customers who, if they weren't doing it in that way, they probably would have folded. And then you've got other retailers who've done a terrible job. They stopped taking orders because they couldn't get into store, or they couldn't get into their DCs, or all of their people have been off isolated.
Yep.
And haven't really upheld their customer expectation, and they started winding back. But
I ordered from a major chain some underwear last night, and all over the website it's going to take 15 to 20 days just to pack your order. And I can tell you, not as much went in that basket. It was just like, okay, I might just try somewhere else. Like, I'll get these things because you sell them, but anything else I could find a very easy replacement.
Yep.
I'm not waiting 20 days just for you to put it in a box and send it to me.
I think you've got to ask why. In this day and age, why? We know these challenges are not new. They've been around for 2 years. This is now business as usual. You have to be planning for it. You have to be adapting the way you do business and the way you run your operations to make sure that you can maintain that expectation. Customers still need things. They still want to buy stuff.
Yeah, they're not prepared to wait a month to get them.
Wait a month. That's ridiculous.
Not for something like underwear, where it is something, it's something you replenish. It's not like it's a bespoke, something custom that's coming monogrammed.
I'm hoping it's not urgent too for later.
Well, I did actually think, I recently spent 3 months in the country, and I was in a small town. When we shut down, I moved to the country with my family to renovate this little country shack. We thought it would be good for our daughter to experience how the other half lived. But in this town, there was once a Kmart, once a Target country which shut down, and there was nowhere for you to buy underwear. Unless you could buy it at Woolies or Coles, you had to travel 40 minutes to be able to buy something as simple as a pair of socks. And every time I see something like that, my first thought is, okay, it's all right for me. I can just go to the mall. I can just go to Chatswood Chase. But they can't just do that.
No.
So apart from using stores as distribution centres, and you've kind of said this a few times, but I just want to solidify it, how do you think retailers can minimise those obstacles to make sure that the customers are getting what they want when they want and happy at the way that it's getting to them?
I think it's about stock accuracy and availability. We keep saying it. We've said it from...
Can you please go and hang out with the guys from Kmart?
I tell you, there's people at work who love that place, and I get why, but the frustration with them is, you never know what they've got. You never know if it's in
They
stock.
don't know what they've got.
They don't know what they've got, and it's really challenging. And to be able to, fulfillment, it lives and dies on your availability and knowing where your stock is and how much of it you've got. For some categories, you can't do substitutions. Paracetamol, you might be able to swap out one brand or another. If you're buying apparel, you've bought a specific style and a specific colour. There is no substitution. You have to know if you've got that, where it is, and how long it's going to take you to get it.
Yeah.
So really important. I think that's one of the key things, and still isn't being done particularly well across the industry. And I'll include some of our clients in that as well. They have no idea what they've got and where it is.
Why do you think, we said earlier that technology has changed so quickly, and you could walk around this show and find someone who can do that for you.
Yep.
Why do you think retailers have been so slow to adapt something so crucial to the whole running of a business?
I think that the choice is overwhelming. You look around here, there are so many technical vendors in the retail space, and this isn't all of them. And I think they just get overwhelmed by that speed of change, and it's very hard for them to keep up. They've got a lot of challenges as well. It's low margin, it's competitive, it's hard work to keep up. And so they're always looking at where the bigger problem is and what they need to solve now. And it's a lot more short-term thinking. Whereas trying to get stock accuracy, and it's not something you're ever going to get 100% right, because you've got these random events called customers that walk in, they'll take stuff off the shelves, and you thought you had a pack of ibuprofen and you no longer do. You also have customers who walk in and they'll take it off the shelf and they won't even go through your POS system. It'll just walk out with them. Those sort of things that they add up, and I think that's a real challenge. That's not something you could actually solve for 100%, but you're going to get close enough.
What advice would you give to someone who struggles with stock accuracy?
Get better at it.
Nick, do you have any advice for someone? You've got
Stock
a lot
accuracy.
of stock, yeah.
It's having good alternatives, so you're never going to get it 100% right. I think it's about offering something else if it's not available and being able to still offer that as an option. I think in our category, there's lots of other alternate options that would work quite well across the board. But that would probably be my advice. But on your point before around why, I was thinking before, why would I not change vendors or suppliers or tech? A lot of it's got to do with the complexity of integration. And we're still not at that stage yet where it's very easy to implement a new system. It takes time, and you're spending time on that instead of making money. So it's a very hard decision to make the choice to move across. And I think until we get to a point where it's a bit easier to implement some more complex systems across the board, people are not going to switch or go ahead with what those new trends are until someone makes it a lot easier.
I mentioned earlier that I am the kind of person who will buy specifically when I know things are quick. I know I'll go to a specific company when they can fulfill whatever it is that I need. Do you think that there's a way that you can disrupt that? If you're not Chemist Warehouse, do you think there's a way that you can break in and be the person that people come to, even though there's a big brand that can, maybe their inventory management's off, or maybe it's that last mile that's slow, but they have that brand behind them?
It's really tough. And I feel for the smaller players because you don't have the power of being able to control your pricing. So that's one thing you can't control, that where bigger retailers have more power to buy stuff at a cheaper rate. The one thing you can do is have unique products that aren't available, and I think that's one way you can win. And you've got to use those new marketing channels to get to your customer base and be really clear with it. I think, the TikToks of the world are where a lot of those smaller brands get really good influence content across the board. But yeah, I think that's probably the way. I wouldn't try. I mean, you can't compete price-wise, so it's either got to be better service, which is also very hard, or it's got to be unique.
Can we talk about that for a second? Do you think that it is more difficult, I'd love both of your opinion, more difficult for a company that is not an enterprise customer to not have as good customer service? Because I would have said the exact opposite.
So in the start, it's fine for a small company, but when you scale, if you don't scale your customer service at the same rate, we've seen a lot of examples across the board during the COVID period where there's been exponential growth across lots of different smaller e-com platforms, and they can't keep up with the orders because they don't have the. They can't even keep up with
customer service tickets.
I'm not saying we or big retailers get it right 100% of the time, but it's extremely hard to scale. If you don't scale your service at the same time, you're going to fall behind anyway. So you've got to think about it just being together.
What do you think, Matt? Is it possible?
Is it possible? It's hard. Like Nick said, he's 100% right. I think smaller retailers, they tend to have a bit more of an agility to do things in their early days, but as they scale up and as they grow, obviously, there's more and more layers that come into it, and it's really hard to actually keep up with that. So we can differentiate initially, and you see all these little players come along and they disrupt with a new brand and it's cool and people love it and they want to buy more stuff. They start buying more stuff and it just becomes that the first thing that goes is the customer service. It's that personalised touch. My daughter, she's dead into surfwear. She loves buying hoodies and all sorts of things like this little niche company in New Zealand. And they personally sign every package with a little card going, "Oh, hey, Amy, thanks a lot. We love that you've bought our stuff." How long are they going to be able to keep that up for if they grow?
I'm curious. Why, Nick, why do you think that a company as big as yours couldn't do that at scale, couldn't send that handwritten or just sign? Because I've had orders from large companies where Sam's just written her name. Like it's a pre-printed, but Sam's written her name or something like that.
Probably just got to do with this. I mean, it's not more complicated than the scale. You'd have to have someone actually doing it. And if you're doing, some of the really big retailers do 15, 20, 25,000 orders from the distribution centre a day. That's a lot of signing and a lot of personal cards. And I think a lot of the time as well, it's got to do with the margin too. It costs money for those things too. So you've got a business case that's got to be really clear about what does that actually drive from that point. I mean, it's no secret, but Chemist Warehouse's biggest loyalty is around pricing. People come back because they know the price is great and they can put up with a bunch of things. Where if your pricing's not great, you've got to do other things to add value and grab loyalty. So can you do both? I wish you could. I hope you can, but maybe one day.
Do you think when it comes to fulfillment then, customers are more than happy to trade off experience for cheaper prices?
Well, not at any cost, but at some cost, yes, I would say. So a lot of the time when something's quite expensive and you can get it at a really cheap reduced rate, you put up with it a bit more if it's not something you need immediately. But if it's going to be 3 weeks for delivery, and you can, there was a big trend a few years ago where people would buy a lot of stuff from the US, like the iHerbs and when the GST wasn't there, because you're always on imported items. And there was a big trend in it because people were like, I'm saving 20, 30%, I'm going to get it from there and I'm going to get it sent over. And there was that big explosion of, even Australia Post had an option of those like kind of places you could send your American items to the American store to get across. And it was a really big trend during that period of time. But that's kind of gone away now. The GST's kind of made it more, and the dollar's obviously a lot more less competitive in that regard for imports. But yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? I don't know if I completely have the answer, but I think well, in the industry we're working, pricing is the most important thing. Yeah. If you can get experience with that at the same time, you're not unbeatable, but you're in a really good position.
Can I ask you a slightly different question, Matt? Kind of the reverse question, which is there an expectation from the customer that if they pay more for something, that fulfillment side of things is going to be next level?
Oh, absolutely. If you're paying for a similar product and you're paying a premium for it, you've got to think, the customer is thinking about why they're paying that premium. Like conscious, they are expecting a high level of service. They're expecting that you are actually going to follow through on the promise. If they're paying a bargain price, I think there's a lower expectation. They're not going to worry as much. They sort of expect that there might be a few hit and miss opportunities. It's like if you buy off like AliExpress, you're not sure if it's going to turn up. It might turn up. You're not quite sure when, and it's a bit of fun. It's almost like having a gamble. But if you're buying locally from a high-end retailer who's got a reputation, you're paying a premium for it and you expect that level of service. And I think some of them need to, some of those retailers need to remember that. Next point on loyalty is interesting because I'd love to have a conversation on that too. Do you think price points actually breed loyalty in customers?
That's a great question.
It's a really good question. I mean, again, I'm not speaking as somebody who's worked in Chemist Warehouse for a really long period of time, but if I'm stepping back, there is a perception, right or wrong, that the pricing is always going to be the most competitive in market for certain items. So you're loyal to go back there to know that you're going to buy your items every month or every catalogue period or whatever it happens to be. So I'm a firm believer that if you're known as a low cost or a discount retailer, if you don't have the best pricing, well, people are going to go elsewhere. But if you do, that brings your loyalty back. The thing with loyalty programs is you're trying to get people to buy more from you and trying to be more engaged with the brand. I'm a firm believer that the best loyalty you have is around price and around how competitive you are and what you're able to offer.
Oh, there's a topic for discussion. Matt, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I differ because I've got an opinion on this. I've got an opinion on this. I don't think it's all about price.
I don't think so either.
I actually believe it's about being able to differentiate that experience. And I know it varies depending on the category, right? You've got, if you're a discount retailer, then price is really the only thing that you're trying to breed loyalty on. But if you've got something else that you can bring to it, you go into a premium department store, you're expecting a personalised level of service. You want to feel special.
If you're buying a Prada handbag, it's not about price.
No.
That's not going to give you the loyalty, is it?
It's not. But some of that, and tying fulfillment back into that is, again, it's about making sure that customer knows exactly when it's coming, that they have certainty that when they are clicking buy on that they do feel special. I'm telling you what's happening with your handbag. There might be a handwritten note and things like that. All of those small things tie into what is, the art of fulfillment. It's not just getting stuff to customers. And I think a lot of retailers around, price is one point of loyalty. It's actually that whole experience, that whole end-to-end thing, and make the customer feel special. It really does.
Yeah,
change that up.
I do think that because I am always prepared. I'm a tight ass. I'll be honest. There's things I'll pay for, and there's things I won't pay for. Shipping, no one likes to pay for shipping. But I know that if I have to pay for shipping, one, I want to maximise my order, but two, I want to know that the quality and my experience is going to match that. I don't want to pay for shipping if I'm just buying from a department store where I get nothing out of the purchase experience. I go to, and I'm not dissing department stores. What I'm saying is you go there, it's a very homogenous experience. Maybe the search engine's not that fantastic. I don't want to pay for that customer experience, but I do want to pay for someone who gives me the updates, who says my order's been packed, who says it's on its way. And, I get my little notifications on my phone saying it's out for delivery, and I'm looking out off my desk to see if the postman's been and all that kind of stuff. So my last question for you guys is if there was one thing that you could implement when it comes to fulfillment that doesn't exist yet, what would it be?
Great. This is the one I was hoping you were going to ask me first. Doesn't exist yet? That's a really hard one to answer. I think there's some solutions out there that sort of early stage. What I would love to see is greater insight around the end-to-end, like the end-to-end customer journey and knowing how if I could somehow understand how a customer is feeling at any point in time about their order and being able to respond to that somehow, I would love to be able to do something like that.
Surely we could just put little happy faces at each stage of the notification.
Well, yeah.
How are you feeling right now?
Like just every day, just spam them and
Because that's a great question. That's a great answer because I get more excited the closer my parcel is. So my height of excitement is once I press the buy button and then I forget about it.
Yeah.
But then when it's out for delivery, I'm like, oh, and you're waiting a lot and the anticipation grows. I mean, that's less of an issue when you're getting 1 hour delivery, but if it's a week, then that excitement tends to grow with each notification.
Yeah, well, I think there's a point. There's a psychology around the customers buying. You know, it's a reward cycle. And if you read about it, you understand that customers, when they're buying, they do get a psychological reward from receiving their goods. Like, you know, I just saw you got animated.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm buying something. It's really cool. But being able to see how that ebbs and flows, like that feeling of the customer changes as they're waiting for an order. You know, you're always like, the day it's arriving, you're like, yes, it's coming. Finally, and then if it doesn't turn up, you're really disappointed. So I don't know.
How do we tap into that as marketers?
Yeah, is there any way we can actually measure that and then use it to be able to guide how we're actually...
Because we all said that most of the time, people don't reorder until the first order came. But now that you've had that conversation, I don't wonder if like the day before or the day of delivery might not be the best time to tap into trying to get customers to reorder.
Yeah.
We don't know right now.
Not sure.
Nick, what would you implement?
I'm going to cheat and have two. So, and this is kind of pushing the boundaries of fulfillment, but I'd love to be able to go to a store and be able to walk out without having to go through a point of sale and be able to just take it straight to your car and then it charges you as normal. And I think we've seen some examples where they've said they've done it, but it's never gone full scale for that point. It removes the friction from all of your fraud and all those kind of things as well, as long as it's things. So there's a couple of great examples out in that space, but on the more traditional fulfillment stuff, I still think one of the biggest problems across the board for all retailers, for all orders, and you kind of had a point before around it, was there's so many orders that are delivered by partners where the person's not home and they can't leave the item. And it gets sent back and it's just this overarching thing. So I don't have the answer for it, but there's got to be a better method for when people are at work during the day or they're down the street and there's a delivery window of 2 hours or whatever like that. You don't want to be staying home for 2 hours. So I don't know whether it's about having safe spots in people's houses or little boxes to put orders in or
like we should all have
whatever it happens to be, or whether it's delivery. But I think no one's solved that problem yet.
No.
And unless you've got like a front desk in an apartment block or you've got something where it can be left, a lot of the time there is still a large percentage of orders that get sent back.
I mean, in terms of parcel lockers, there's not a lot of them. It's not like every convenience store has a parcel locker or every hairdresser down the road has a parcel locker.
Yeah, we and many other retailers, you can't leave stuff. You've got to hand it to somebody. You've got to have it in a secure place because of what's in the item. It could be flammable. It could be a pharmaceutical. You know, supermarkets are sometimes the same as well, where you've got to do it at your own risk. But the reality is things happen and you go out or you can't be sitting around waiting for your order all day. Now, I've seen Australia Post more recently. I've got a delivery window for a parcel I've got coming tomorrow, which is a small little thing. And that's okay because I can kind of say to my wife, you know, will you be home during this time? But not everybody has that luxury during that period of thing. So I still think that's the biggest issue across the board from fulfillment. And I think it annoys people the most as well when you're not home you're waiting for a parcel and then it gets delayed and then
it goes to the post office and by the time you got home from work, the post office is shut.
Yeah, so I don't have the answer for it, but I would, if I could click my fingers, there'd be a solution for that.
Okay. Was that two or just one?
There's the other one, be able to walk out of a store.
Oh, there, yeah.
Well, you can do that, but the payment thing's a bit of an iffy.
I mean, I love my local Woolworths just quickly has the scan and go, where I just literally walk through and scan everything, put it in my basket and walk out. I love that thing.
Yeah.
So not quite hands-free, but certainly on the way
model that
there.
one, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what the shrinkage is for that, but...
Well, I think it's pretty similar, to be honest. I don't think it's much different because, you know, it's just a different way of taking something if you're going to take it. I mean, the reality is people are not scanning stuff as it is, apparently, so it's probably the same method, isn't it?
All right, guys, that's time for us to wrap up. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Selena. Thanks, Nick.
So that's a wrap. I'd love to hear what insight you've gotten from this episode and how you're going to put it into action. If you're a social kind of person, follow me at @TheSelenaKnight and make sure to leave a comment and let me know. And if this episode made you think a little bit differently, or gave you some inspiration, or perhaps gave you the kick that you needed to take action, then please take a couple of minutes to leave me a review on your platform of choice. Because the more reviews the show gets, the more independent retail and e-commerce stores just like yours that we can help to scale. And when that happens, it's a win for you, a win for your community, and a win for your customers. I'll see you on the next episode.